I was hiding under a blanket in the back seat of my family's car on my son's wedding morning when I heard the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about the woman he was about to marry. "His family's money will pay Tony." Vanessa's voice came through the car speakers, cold and calculated. 1 year of marriage, a clean divorce, and we're free. Randall gets paid, and we disappear. My son Scott sat in the front passenger seat, completely unaware I was there listening to the woman he loved planning to destroy him. That morning I'd woken up as Nancy Whitmore, proud mother, preparing for her only child's wedding. By noon I would become something else entirely, the woman who stood up in a cathedral full of guests and said 2 words that changed everything. I object, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a mother's instinct, an anonymous letter, and a family driver's loyalty came together to save my son from the biggest mistake of his life. The morning of Scott's wedding, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror at 6:45 a.m., my hands trembling as I tried to fasten my pearl earrings. The same earrings my late husband Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. The same ones I'd worn to every major moment in our son's life, his high school graduation, his college acceptance, the day he took over as vice president of Whitmore Hotels. But this morning my hands wouldn't cooperate. It wasn't wedding day nerves. It wasn't the bittersweet feeling of watching your child start a new chapter. It was the envelope. 3 days ago, someone had slipped it under my office door at the hotel. No return address, no signature, just 7 words written in careful block letters: "Scott is marrying a married woman." I'd stared at those words for hours, turned the paper over and over looking for any clue about who sent it. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as the work of someone jealous, someone petty. But another part, the part that had kept me awake for 3 nights straight, whispered that it might be true. Because if I was being honest with myself, I'd felt something wrong about Vanessa Sterling from the very beginning. I let my hands drop earrings forgotten and looked at my reflection. At 58, I still recognized myself, the same green eyes as my mother, the same determined chin that Robert used to kiss and call stubborn. But there were new lines around my eyes now, etched by 4 years of grief since Robert's sudden heart attack, and by 2 years of watching my son fall in love with a woman I couldn't quite trust. "Trust your gut, Nancy," Robert's voice echoed in my memory. "It's never wrong about people." My gut had been screaming for 2 years. I'd just been too afraid to listen. Scott met Vanessa at a charity gala 2 years ago. The Whitmore Foundation's annual fundraiser for children's hospitals, Robert's legacy, the cause he'd championed before he died. Scott had taken over as chairman, determined to honor his father's memory. I remember the night Scott brought her to meet me. He'd burst into my office at the hotel, practically glowing, looking happier than I'd seen him since the funeral. "Mom, I want you to meet someone." She was beautiful, I'll give her that. 29 years old, with the kind of polished elegance that comes from careful cultivation. Dark hair and a perfect chignon designer dress that whispered money smile that showed just the right amount of warmth. "Mrs. Whitmore, what an honor," she'd said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Scott talks about you constantly." Something in that greeting felt rehearsed, but I pushed the thought away. "Don't be paranoid, Nancy. Don't become that mother-in-law." We talked. She said all the right things about grief, about healing, about how much Scott meant to her. But I watched her eyes. Robert had taught me that look at people's eyes, not their words. Vanessa's eyes kept wandering, to the original artwork on my walls, to the view of downtown Atlanta through floor-to-ceiling windows, to the expensive furnishings that represented 3 generations of Whitmore success. "I grew up with very little," she'd said at one point, her voice soft with just the right touch of vulnerability. "Seeing what you've built here, it's inspiring." Then came the questions. Too specific. Too detailed for someone who claimed not to understand business. "How do you manage such a large portfolio? Do you have business partners, or is it all family-run? How does succession planning work in a company like this?" At the time, I'd attributed it to genuine interest. A young woman trying to understand her boyfriend's world. But those questions echoed in my mind now as I stood in my bedroom, the anonymous letter burning in the drawer of my nightstand. Over the following months, I tried to love Vanessa. Scott was so happy, so alive again after the dark year following his father's death. Who was I to question that? But the red flags kept appearing, subtle but persistent. She had no old friends. Everyone in her circle was new people she'd met in the last few years. "I like to live in the present," she'd explained when I asked about college roommates or childhood friends. Her family was overseas and difficult to reach. No video calls, no visits planned, just vague references to a complicated relationship she didn't want to discuss. She'd left our dinner parties twice, both times after getting phone calls that made her face go pale. Work emergency, she'd said, but the fear in her eyes didn't match the excuse. And there was the incident with the photographs. We'd been planning a family photo wall for the hotel's lobby 4 generations of Whitmores. When I asked Vanessa for some photos from her childhood to include in a separate display about the future of the Whitmore family, she'd hesitated for just a moment too long before saying all her childhood photos were in storage. Individually, these things meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. But Scott was in love. Deeply, completely in love. And I remembered what Robert always said, sometimes we have to let our children make their own mistakes. Except this didn't feel like a mistake Scott would recover from. This felt like something that would destroy him. I pulled the envelope from my nightstand drawer and read it again as I'd done 100 times over the past 3 days. Scott is marrying a married woman. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. Someone had taken time with this. Someone who wanted to be taken seriously but didn't want to be identified. I'd spent 3 days trying to convince myself it was a lie. Some jealous ex-boyfriend. A business rival trying to hurt our family. A random cruel person. But what if it wasn't? My phone buzzed. A text from Scott. "Mom, are you up? I can't sleep. Can't believe I'm getting married today." My heart clenched. My sweet boy. My only child. The son Robert and I had raised to be kind, trusting, generous. All the qualities that made him vulnerable to someone like Vanessa if the letter was true. I typed back, "I'm awake, sweetheart. Big day ahead. I love you." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Love you too, Mom. Dad would have loved Vanessa, right? I wish he could be here." Oh, Scott. Robert would have seen through her in 5 minutes. But I couldn't tell him that. Not without proof. Not without destroying our relationship if I was wrong. I looked at the clock, 7:02 a.m. The wedding was at 2 p.m. 7 hours to either confirm my worst fears or put them to rest. I was reaching for my phone to call Scott and suggest we talk when I heard gravel crunching in the driveway. A car door closing. Footsteps on the front walk. It was only 7:05. No one should be here yet. I threw on my robe and hurried downstairs, my heart pounding. Through the front window, I could see our family car, the black sedan we used for formal occasions. And standing beside it, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight, was James Porter. James had been our driver for 15 years. He'd driven Robert to his last business meeting. He'd driven me to the hospital the night Robert died. He'd driven Scott to his first day at Whitmore Hotels as vice president. James was family loyal, discreet, and not prone to panic. But the expression on his face as I opened the door was pure controlled panic. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need to speak with you, privately, now." We sat in my kitchen, untouched coffee growing cold between us. James's hands were clasped on the table, knuckles white. 3 weeks ago, he began, I was running errands in the Riverside district. You'd asked me to pick up those specialty chocolates from that shop near the park, remember? I nodded. A small gift for the hotel's concierge team. "I saw her," James continued. "Miss Sterling, Vanessa. She was coming out of a house on Maple Street, 847 Maple Street. I wouldn't have thought much of it except she wasn't alone." My stomach dropped. There was a man and a little girl, maybe 5 years old. James people have friends. It wasn't like friends, Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was firm but gentle. The man had his arm around her waist. The little girl was holding her hand. And when the little girl called out, "Mommy, wait!" I saw Vanessa's face. It wasn't the face of someone babysitting or visiting. It was the face of someone who belonged there. The kitchen seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. "I didn't want to believe it," James went on. "I thought maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I'd misheard. So I didn't say anything, but I couldn't let it go. I have a friend we served together in the Army. He's a private investigator now. I asked him to look into it. Discreetly." He pulled a manila folder from his jacket and slid it across the table. His hand trembled slightly. "The report came this morning at 6 a.m. Mrs. Whitmore. I'm so sorry." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. The first page hit me like a physical blow. Confidential investigation report, subject, Vanessa Marie Sterling née Quinn. Also known as Vanessa Marie Morgan, marital status, married. Spouse Derek Allen Morgan, date of marriage, June 15, 2019. Children Emma, Grace Morgan D.O.B. March 3, 2020. Couldn't breathe. The words swam before my eyes. 2019. She married Derek Morgan in 2019. Scott met her in 2023. She'd been married for 4 years when she started dating my son. The next pages were worse. Photographs. Vanessa and a man in casual clothes sitting on a porch. Vanessa pushing a little girl on a swing. Vanessa kissing the man, not a friendly peck, but the kiss of two people with history, with intimacy, with love. Bank statements showing joint accounts. A mortgage in both their names. Utility bills addressed to the Morgan family. A marriage certificate official and legal and undeniable. "James," I whispered, "does Scott know? Has he seen any of this?" "No, ma'am. I wanted to come to you first. Because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because Mr. Scott is so in love with her. If I went to him with this, he'd think I was lying. He'd think I was trying to sabotage his happiness. It would destroy our relationship, and he still might not believe me." He was right. Scott would defend Vanessa. He'd find explanations. He'd convince himself this was all a misunderstanding. "He needs to see it for himself," James said quietly. "Not pictures in a folder. Not testimony from others. He needs to witness the truth with his own eyes." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though part of me already knew. James leaned forward. "I've been tracking her patterns for the past week. Every morning she goes to that house on Maple Street. She stays for about an hour, then leaves to get ready for her day. She thinks no one knows. She's careful she parks a block away. She never mentions it. She keeps her two lives completely separate." "Until today," I said slowly. "Until today, Mrs. Whitmore Mr. Scott is supposed to be at the church by 11 a.m. for photos. I'm scheduled to pick him up at 10:30. But what if we made a small detour first? You want Scott to see her there, at that house, with her husband and daughter. I want Mr. Scott to see the truth before he says I do. Because once he's married to her, once she has legal access to the Whitmore assets—" James didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. My mind raced through the implications. Our family fortune, the hotels, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios Robert had spent 35 years building. Once Vanessa married Scott, she'd have access to all of it. "There's more," James said quietly. He pulled out another page from the folder. "My friend did some deeper digging. Derek Morgan, Vanessa's husband, has significant debts. Medical bills from when their daughter was born premature. And about 6 months ago, they took out a loan from a man named Tony Vincent. A loan shark. Worse, Vincent has connections to organized crime. My friend says he's been investigated multiple times for extortion, and worse. The Morgans owe him $500,000. If they don't pay—" The implication hung heavy in the air. "So she targeted Scott," I said, the pieces falling into place. "She researched our family. She found out about our wealth. She planned this." "It appears so, ma'am." I stood up, pacing my kitchen, my mind spinning. In 7 hours, Scott was supposed to marry this woman. In 7 hours, he would legally bind himself to someone who saw him as a solution to her problems, not as a person to love. Unless I stopped it. "What time does Scott wake up?" James asked. "He's already awake. He texted me a few minutes ago." "Then we need to move fast. Here's what I propose." 20 minutes later, I was dressed and ready when I heard Scott's footsteps on the stairs. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, already in his dress pants and undershirt, his hair still damp from the shower. "Mom, you're up early." He crossed to kiss my cheek, and my heart broke at how happy he looked. How innocent. "Couldn't sleep," I said, forcing a smile. "Too excited." "Me neither. I keep thinking about Dad. How much I wish he could be here." "He is here, sweetheart. In you." Scott smiled, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. "Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you like Vanessa? I mean, really like her?" The question caught me off guard. I chose my words carefully. "What matters is whether you love her, Scott." "That's not what I asked." He sat down at the kitchen table, his fingers drumming nervously. "Sometimes I feel like you're holding back, like you're being polite but not genuine." This was my moment. I could tell him everything right now, show him the folder, explain what James discovered. But he wouldn't believe me. Not yet. He'd think I was a jealous mother trying to ruin his happiness. He'd marry her anyway and I'd lose my son. Scott, I said gently, sitting beside him, you know I want you to be happy more than anything in the world. I know, but... And I know that Vanessa makes you smile. She brought you back to life after Dad died. She did, he said softly. I was drowning, Mom. After Dad, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And she was there. She understood. She saved me. My heart ached. Because that's how predators work, isn't it? They find the vulnerable, the grieving, the trusting. I just want to make sure, I continued, that you're not confusing gratitude with love, that you're not rushing into this because you're afraid of being alone again. Scott's expression shifted. Is that what you think? That I'm only marrying her because I'm afraid? I think grief makes us vulnerable. I think loneliness makes us see what we want to see instead of what's really there. He stood up abruptly. You don't know her like I do, Mom. You don't see how she cares about me, how she supports my dreams, how she... His phone buzzed. He pulled it out and I watched his expression change. It's Vanessa, he said. She wants me to pick her up before we head to the church. Some emergency at her friend Rachel's place. Rachel? I'd never heard Vanessa mention anyone named Rachel before. Where does Rachel live? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Scott checked his phone. 847 Maple Street. She says to come to the front door. She'll be waiting upstairs. My blood ran cold. 847 Maple Street. The address from James's report. She was sending Scott to the house where she lived with her real family. Why was this a test? Was she that confident he'd never figure it out? James is here, I said quickly. He can drive you. I'll meet you at the church. Scott nodded already, texting back. Okay, thanks, Mom. And I'm sorry I snapped. I know you're just looking out for me. Always, sweetheart. He kissed my forehead and headed out. I watched through the window as he climbed into the front seat of the sedan. James caught my eye through the rearview mirror, gave a slight nod. The plan was in motion. But something James didn't know, something I'd decided in that moment watching my son's happy, trusting face, was that I wasn't going to let Scott face this alone. I grabbed my purse and ran to the car. James was just starting the engine when I yanked open the back door and dove inside. Mrs. Whitmore, what are you... I'm coming, I said, breathless. Just don't let Scott see me. I could see James's eyes in the rearview mirror, concerned but understanding. From the front seat, Scott called out, Everything okay back there? All fine, sir, James replied smoothly. Just checking the back seat for your mother's forgotten items. You know how she is. Ha! Yeah, Mom would forget her head if it wasn't attached. James's eyes met mine in the mirror. He pulled out a blanket from the side compartment, the one we kept for emergencies, and handed it back to me. You'll need to stay down, ma'am, he whispered. And stay quiet. I nodded, my heart hammering. I bunched up my dress, made myself as small as possible, and pulled the blanket over my head. The world went dark. I could hear everything, the engine starting, Scott settling into his seat, the radio playing softly, but I couldn't see anything. This was insane. I was 58 years old, hiding under a blanket in the back seat of my own car on my son's wedding morning. But I was also a mother who would do anything to protect her child. Even this. Ready to go, Fred? Scott's voice was bright, excited. James had asked Scott to call him James years ago, but Scott had nicknamed him Fred after some movie character, and it stuck. Yes, sir, right on schedule. The car began to move. Under the blanket, I tried to control my breathing. Slow, quiet breaths. Don't make a sound. Man, Scott laughed. I can't believe I'm doing this. Getting married. It feels surreal. It's a big day, Mr. Scott, James replied, his voice perfectly calm. The biggest. I just wish Dad were here, you know, he'd probably have some joke about me finally settling down. About time someone was willing to put up with me. My throat tightened. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Your father would be very proud, James said quietly. The engine hummed. I could feel every turn, every bump in the road. My legs were already starting to cramp from being curled up so small, but I didn't dare move. Hey, Fred, Scott said. Do you think Vanessa's happy, like really happy with me? Oh, sweetheart. What matters, sir, is whether you're happy. Everyone keeps saying that, but I want to know she's happy too. I want to know I'm enough for her. The vulnerability in his voice was gutting. This was my son's deepest fear, that he wouldn't be enough, that people would leave him like his father had left, even though Robert's death wasn't a choice. Vanessa had found that fear and exploited it. "It's Vanessa," Scott said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Hey, babe, I'm on my way." He must have put her on speaker because suddenly her voice filled the car, smooth, sweet, perfectly warm. "Good morning, handsome. How are you feeling?" "Nervous?" Scott laughed. "But good nervous, you know. Like this is really happening." "It is." Her tone shifted slightly. Something I couldn't quite place. "After today, everything changes." Under the blanket, I frowned. Everything changes. The words were normal enough, something any bride might say, but the way she said it, there was something underneath, something that didn't sound like joy. Scott didn't seem to notice. "I can't wait to start our life together. You, me, the whole future." A pause, just a beat too long. "Yeah," Vanessa said. "Finally. Our life. Finally. Finally." Why did that word sound so wrong? I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to slow my racing heart. "Where's your mom?" Vanessa asked, her voice casual but curious. "She's coming separately. She wanted some time alone to process, I think. You know how moms get emotional about weddings." My throat tightened. "Good," Vanessa said, then softer, almost to herself. "That's good. Good. Why would it be good that I wasn't there?" Before I could process that, Scott's phone buzzed a different sound. An incoming call trying to break through. "Hang on, babe," Scott said. "Someone's trying to call me." "Who?" Vanessa's voice sharpened. "I don't know. Unknown number." "Probably a spam call," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Anyway, I was saying about the flowers." They kept talking, but I barely heard it, because the phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time Scott's voice changed just slightly. "That's weird. Same number calling back." "Ignore it," Vanessa said. "It's your wedding day. You don't have time for telemarketers." "Yeah, you're right." They said their goodbyes. "Love you, see you at the altar." And Scott hung up. Silence filled the car for maybe 30 seconds. Then the phone rang again. Not a buzz this time. A full, loud ring. "For the love of..." Scott grabbed the phone. "Same number. Third time in 5 minutes. What the hell?" "You want me to pull over, sir?" James asked calmly. "No, I'll just..." Scott's voice was clipped now, annoyed. "Hello?" I couldn't hear the other person, but I heard Scott's response, and it changed everything. "I told you not to call this number." His voice dropped low. Not angry. Scared. Actually scared. "I told you I'd handle it. Stop calling me." He hung up fast. The car felt suddenly smaller, tighter. "Everything all right, Mr. Scott?" James asked, his tone perfectly neutral. Scott forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. Yeah, just wedding stress. You know how it is." "Of course, sir." But I could hear it. The tremor underneath Scott's words, the way his breathing had quickened, the way he shifted in his seat like he couldn't get comfortable. My son was scared, and he was lying. To James, to himself, maybe even to me if I'd been sitting beside him instead of hiding like a fugitive under a blanket. Who was calling him? What was he supposed to be handling? What secret was my son keeping? I wanted to scream. Who was that? "Who's calling you? What aren't you telling me?" But I stayed silent, frozen, listening. James's voice came again, gentle. "You sure you're all right, sir?" "I'm fine, Fred." Scott's voice cracked on the word fine. "Just let's get to Rachel's place. I need to pick up Vanessa. Everything will be fine once we pick her up. Everything will be fine once I marry her." Once I marry her. Like marriage was a finish line, a solution, a way to make something stop. My chest felt like someone had wrapped a band around it and pulled tight. "What are you running from, Scott? And why do you think marrying Vanessa will save you?" The car slowed, then turned. I felt the shift in direction, a pull to the left when we should have been going straight. Even hidden beneath the blanket, I'd memorized the route to the cathedral. We'd held every major family event there. Robert's funeral, Scott's baptism, my parents' anniversary celebration. Every important moment of our lives had happened in that building. This wasn't the way to the cathedral. "Fred," Scott's voice carried uncertainty. "Where are we going?" "Slight detour, sir," James answered smoothly, following the GPS to the address Miss Sterling sent. Scott's phone chimed a text alert. Oh, Scott said, his tone shifting to relief mixed with concern. Vanessa says to come inside, wait in the living room. She's grabbing her things from upstairs. The car turned again. The smooth hum of highway pavement became the rougher texture of neighborhood streets. I felt every bump, every pothole. This is it, Scott sounded confused. This neighborhood is... I thought Vanessa's friends usually lived in... He trailed off. I knew what he meant. Vanessa's circle, or the circle she'd shown us, lived in places like ours. Gated communities. Tree-lined streets with names like Oakmont Drive and Willow Creek Lane. This wasn't that. The car stopped. I'll be right back, Scott said. She told me to wait inside in the living room. The door opened, closed. Footsteps on pavement growing fainter. Then James's voice, low and urgent. Mrs. Whitmore, come out now. I pushed the blanket off. Light flooded in, morning sun almost blinding after so long in darkness. I blinked hard, my eyes adjusting. James stood at the open back door, hand extended to help me out. I took at my legs, stiff and cramping from being curled up for so long. My dress was wrinkled beyond repair. I didn't care. James, I hissed, keeping my voice low. What is this? Where are we? He didn't answer, just pointed. I followed his gesture to a small house, single-story, painted pale yellow, maybe 30 years old. The lawn needed mowing. A child's bike lay on its side near the garage. And there, at the end of the driveway, a mailbox. Black letters on white. The Morgan family. I stared at it. Read it again. Morgan, not Sterling. Morgan. Vanessa's last name is Sterling, I whispered. Her maiden name was Quinn, James said quietly. She uses Sterling professionally, but she's legally Vanessa Morgan, has been for 6 years. My eyes moved to the house. Through the front window I could see Scott standing in a modest living room, looking around with obvious confusion. Look at the side door, Mrs. Whitmore, James said. Not the front, the side. I turned. There on the side of the house, barely visible from where we stood, was a smaller entrance, the kind that led to a mudroom or kitchen. Ordinary. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Watch that door, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not the front, the side. Why, what am I? Please. His hand gripped my arm gently but firmly. Just watch. She doesn't know we're here. She doesn't know you're about to see who she really is. My breath caught. The Morgan family. A house Scott had never been to. A side door I was supposed to watch. And James's face, that look of barely controlled urgency, the same look he'd had when he told me to hide in the car. What am I about to see, James? I whispered, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just watched the house, waiting. And so I did the same. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. I crouched behind James's sedan, my knees pressed against cold concrete, my heart hammering so hard I was sure someone would hear it. The modest neighborhood was quiet at this hour, a few birds chirping, the distant hum of traffic, someone's sprinkler system turning on with a mechanical whir. Nothing about this street matched the world Scott and I inhabited. Nothing about this moment made sense. James had positioned me here with a single instruction: watch that side door. At exactly 8:30 a.m. it opened. Before I could process what I was seeing, before I could prepare myself, my entire world shifted on its axis. Vanessa stepped out. But not the Vanessa I knew, not the polished, perfect woman who'd charmed our family and friends. This Vanessa wore faded jeans and an oversized hoodie. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry. She moved with quick efficiency, no grace, no pretense. This was someone else entirely. Then I heard it, a child's voice, high and sweet and innocent. "Mommy, do you have to go?" A little girl burst through the doorway, maybe 5 years old. Blonde curls bouncing. She threw her arms around Vanessa's legs. My breath stopped. "Mommy?" Vanessa knelt down, her voice softening in a way I'd never heard before. "Just for today, sweetheart. Then everything will be different." A man appeared in the doorway, late 30s, wearing worn jeans and an exhausted expression. He looked at Vanessa with desperate resignation. "We need to talk about Tony," he said. He called again. "If we don't have the money by Monday..." "Not now." Vanessa cut him off, her voice sharp. "Scott is inside, in the front room." The man's face crumpled. "You're really doing this? Marrying him?" He shook his head slowly, like he couldn't believe what was happening. "He seems like a good man. He doesn't deserve this." His goodness won't pay Tony, Vanessa said, her words like ice. His family's money will. The Whitmore estate, the hotels, the accounts. That's what keeps our daughter safe. She stepped closer to the man, her voice dropping but still audible. 1 year of marriage, a clean divorce, and we're free. Tony gets paid, and we disappear. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from crying out. His family's money, Bernard's legacy, Scott's inheritance, everything my husband had built over 35 years. She wanted to steal it all. The man stared at the ground. I don't like this. You don't have to like it. Vanessa pulled him close and kissed him. Not the polite gesture she gave Scott in public. This was real. Years of history in that kiss. Shared pain, shared desperation, a real relationship. You just have to trust me, she said softly. The little girl tugged on the man's shirt. Daddy, can we have pancakes when Mommy comes back? Sure, baby, he said, his voice breaking. Go inside. I'll be right there. As the child skipped away, humming to herself, something shattered inside my chest. That innocent girl had no idea her mother was about to destroy another family to save their own. From deep inside the house, I heard Scott's voice calling out, Vanessa, you ready? We should get to the church. I watched Vanessa transform. It happened in seconds. The hard edges melted away. The calculating gleam disappeared. Suddenly, she was the gentle fiancée again, the woman who'd held Scott through his grief, who'd promised him a future. The mask fit perfectly. She slipped back through the side door without another word to the man. 30 seconds later, the front door opened. Vanessa emerged with Scott at her side, glowing and radiant in casual clothes, but somehow still looking bridal. Scott wrapped his arm around her waist completely, unaware that she'd just kissed another man, just outlined his financial ruin. All set, Vanessa said cheerfully. Sorry for the delay. Rachel's cat got out, but we found him. She pulled Scott toward a silver sedan parked in the driveway. Let's take my car, baby. I want to drive us to the church together. Just you and me before everything changes. Scott's face softened. Yeah, that's really sweet. He glanced toward the street where James waited in our car. I'll text Fred to meet us there. Perfect. Vanessa kissed his cheek. Let's go get married. Within moments, her car pulled away. I watched it disappear around the corner, taking my son toward what should have been the happiest day of his life. Instead, he was driving into a trap, and I was the only one who could stop it. I stepped out from behind the sedan, my legs shaking, but my resolve absolute. James appeared beside me, his expression grim. Her car, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. She drove them in her car. She's been using it to move between both lives, James replied. There was no admiration in his tone, just grim acknowledgement of effective deception. Mr. Scott never questioned why she insisted on driving herself to certain places. He checked his watch. 20 minutes until they arrive at the church. If you're going to talk to Mr. Morgan, do it now. I walked to the front door, each step heavier than the last. This was it. The moment when I would either save my son or lose him forever. I knocked. The sound echoed louder than I expected. I stood on the front porch, heart racing but hands steady. The morning sun felt too bright for what I was about to do. Inside, footsteps approached. The door opened. The man looked exactly as I'd seen him moments ago, late 30s, exhausted eyes, world-weary. He studied me with confusion, then growing wariness. Can I help you? My name is Nancy Whitmore, I said, keeping my voice steady. I believe you know my son Scott. The color drained from his face instantly. His hand gripped the doorframe. I held up my phone, showing him the engagement photo Scott had sent out 2 months ago. Scott and Vanessa smiling happy in love. Then I showed him the formal portrait from their engagement party. The man staggered backward. Oh, God, he whispered. She's really doing it. I stepped forward. He didn't stop me. The small living room was modest but clean. Worn furniture that had seen better days. Toys scattered on the carpet. A dollhouse, some stuffed animals coloring books. In the corner, the little girl I'd seen outside sat playing, completely absorbed in her game, humming softly to herself. Zoe. Her name was Emma, according to James's report. But she looked like a Zoe. Innocent, sweet, completely unaware that her life was about to change. What is she doing? I asked, facing the man directly. Channeling Bernard's strength. Always face the truth directly, he used to say. The man glanced at his daughter. She hadn't looked up yet, still lost in her play. Then he looked back at me, his eyes hollow with defeat and fear. "She's my wife," his voice cracked. "Legally. We've been married for 6 years." The words hit hard even though I'd known. Hearing it confirmed 6 years made it real. Scott had only known her for 2. "And today," I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my attempt at control, "she's marrying my son." He nodded miserably. "She said marrying into your family would solve everything." "Solve what?" And then the whole story spilled out. His name was Derek Morgan. He and Vanessa had gotten into debt first from medical bills when Emma was born 3 months premature, then from bad investments trying to dig themselves out. When banks wouldn't help, a man named Tony Vincent had. But Tony Vincent wasn't a banker. He was something much worse. "She researched your family," Derek said, not meeting my eyes. "Found out about the hotels, the real estate holdings, the investments. She saw an opportunity." My stomach turned. "She spent months planning this," he continued. "Creating a new identity, Vanessa Sterling. Her maiden name was Quinn Sterling, was her grandmother's name. She used that for her professional life. Getting close to Scott at that charity event wasn't an accident. She knew he'd be there. She knew he was grieving. She knew exactly how to approach him." I thought back to that night 2 years ago. The hospital fundraiser. Scott had been so excited about the beautiful woman who shared his passion for nonprofit work, who understood loss, who made him smile for the first time in months. All a lie, from the very beginning. "Your son seems like a good man," Derek continued, guilt thick in his voice. "He really doesn't deserve this. But Vanessa said if she could just marry him, get access to the Whitmore accounts, we could pay off Tony and disappear. Start over somewhere safe." "Safe from what?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Derek looked up, genuine fear in his eyes. "If Vanessa doesn't pay Tony soon, he said he'd take Emma." The room tilted. "Take Emma. Sell her," Derek whispered, barely audible. "To people who traffic children. We'd never see her again." I felt sick. "After your son's wedding," Derek said, "Vanessa would have access to joint accounts, insurance policies, all of it. She planned to transfer what we needed within a week, then stage a divorce within months." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "If we don't pay Tony by tonight..." He couldn't finish, just looked at his daughter, still playing innocently, singing about princesses and castles. A 5-year-old who had no idea her mother was destroying another family to save her own. A little girl whose life had become a bargaining chip. I stood frozen, my mind racing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Not just about protecting Scott from heartbreak or financial loss. A child's life was at stake. A desperate father who'd been dragged into this nightmare. And somewhere out there, a dangerous man expecting his money tonight. Bernard's voice echoed in my memory. "The right thing is rarely the easy thing, Nancy." I looked at Derek Morgan, this broken, desperate man, and then at little Emma humming her princess song. And in that moment, I made my decision. Not the decision James expected. Not the simple decision, but the right one. I stood in Derek Morgan's living room, the weight of 2 impossible truths crushing down on me. Truth 1, Vanessa was planning to marry my son under false pretenses, to steal from our family, to break Scott's heart, and potentially destroy him financially and emotionally. Truth 2, she was doing it to save her daughter's life. "Mrs. Whitmore," Derek's voice broke through my thoughts. "What are you going to do?" I looked at Emma, still playing with her dollhouse, completely innocent. She was arranging tiny furniture, narrating a story about a princess who lived in a castle with her mommy and daddy. 5 years old. The same age Scott had been when he'd gotten lost at the zoo, and I'd found him crying by the penguin exhibit, convinced he'd never see us again. The same age he'd started kindergarten, so small and brave, with his backpack almost as big as he was. Every child deserved protection, even when saving one meant exposing the sins of their parent. "I'm going to save both of them," I said quietly. Derek's head snapped up. "What, my son and your daughter? I'm going to save them both." "I don't understand. How can you... Do you have Tony Vincent's contact information?" Derek's face paled. "Why would you want that?" I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. Found the name I was looking for. Richard Caldwell Roberts' oldest business partner, now semi-retired but still sharp as ever. More importantly, a man I trusted with my life. "How much does Tony want?" I asked Derek. 500,000. But Mrs. Whitmore, you can't just... I was already dialing. Richard answered on the second ring. Nancy, everything all right? Shouldn't you be getting ready for Scott's wedding? Richard, I need $500,000 in cash. Today, before noon. Silence on the other end. Then Nancy, what's going on? I can't explain right now, but I need you to trust me. Can you do it? Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear Richard's mind working, calculating, weighing risks. For you always. But Nancy, this is... I know. I'll explain everything later. I promise. But right now, I need that money. It'll take some time to pull that much cash together. I'll have to make calls, visit the bank personally. How long? 2 hours, maybe 3. I'll have it by 11:30 at the latest. I checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. The wedding was at 2 p.m. That works. Bring it to the cathedral. Side entrance. And Richard, thank you for never asking questions you know I can't answer yet. That's what friends are for, Nancy. Robert would have done the same for me. I hung up and turned back to Derek. He was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're going to pay Tony, he asked, disbelief coloring every word. I'm going to buy your daughter's safety, and then I'm going to make sure Vanessa faces the consequences of her actions. I don't understand. Why would you help us after what Vanessa is doing to your son? I looked at Emma again. She'd moved on from the dollhouse and was now coloring her tongue, sticking out slightly in concentration. Because Emma is innocent in all this, I said. And because stopping Vanessa without protecting Emma first would make me no better than the people who threatened her. Derek's eyes filled with tears. She did this for Emma. Everything Vanessa did, the lies, the deception targeting your son, it was all to save our daughter. I know, I said softly. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. And that matters. I moved to sit across from Derek, lowering my voice so Emma wouldn't hear. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Tony right now. Tell him you have his money and you want to meet. Somewhere public. Somewhere safe. He won't come himself. He'll send someone. Even better. Tell him you'll pay, but you need proof that the debt is cleared. You need documentation. You need it in writing. Derek shook his head. Tony doesn't work that way. He doesn't leave paper trails. Then record the conversation. Georgia is a one-party consent state. You can legally record without his knowledge. Get him to admit on tape that he threatened Emma, that he's been extorting you, that he traffics children. Mrs. Whitmore, if Tony finds out I'm recording, he won't, because my driver James will be with you, and James has contacts from his military days who know how to handle men like Tony Vincent. I pulled out my phone again and texted James, need you back at Morgan House. Urgent. Don't let Scott see you leave. The response came within seconds. On my way. Mr. Scott went upstairs with Miss Sterling. I have 10 minutes. I turned back to Derek. Once Tony is paid and we have him on tape, I'm going to make sure he's arrested. James listened without interrupting, his expression growing more grim with each detail. When I finished, he nodded slowly. It's risky, but it could work. You know people who can help, I asked. I know someone. Detective Sarah Martinez. She's with the Organized Crime Unit. We served together overseas. She was military police. I was infantry. If anyone can handle Tony Vincent, it's Sarah. Will she do this on such short notice? James pulled out his phone. Let me make a call. While James stepped outside to call Detective Martinez, I sat with Derek and worked out the details. Tony usually works through intermediaries, Derek explained. But for a payment this large, he might show up himself. He likes to be there for the big payoffs. It's a power thing. Where would the meeting be? There's a warehouse in the industrial district. Tony owns it through a shell company. That's where he does most of his business. Too isolated, I said. We need somewhere public but still discreet. Somewhere a police presence won't seem unusual. Derek thought for a moment. The parking garage behind Central Bank. It's public property, but it's got security cameras everywhere. Tony's used it before for other deals because he thinks the cameras make him look legitimate. He doesn't know the police have access to those feeds. James returned his expression cautiously optimistic. Detective Martinez is in. She says she's been trying to build a case against Tony Vincent for 2 years, but hasn't had enough evidence. If we can get him on tape admitting to extortion and trafficking threats, she can move immediately. How long does she need? She's assembling a team now. She can be in position by 10:30. I checked my watch again. 9:15 a.m. We had 45 minutes to set this up, another 45 for the meeting with Tony, and then I needed to be at the cathedral by noon to prepare for what came next. Derek, I said, call Tony. Tell him you have his money, all of it. Tell him you want to meet at 11 o'clock Central Bank parking garage level 3. Tell him you need this debt cleared before end of business today. Derek's hands shook as he pulled out a burner phone, apparently dealing with loan sharks meant keeping untraceable devices. He dialed, put it on speaker so we could all hear. The phone rang 4 times. Then a voice answered, smooth and cold. Morgan, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me. I have your money, Tony. All of it. A pause. All 500,000. Yes, I want to meet, today. Clear this debt. Where'd you get that kind of cash? Derek finally rob a bank? There was dark amusement in Tony's voice. Does it matter? You'll get your money. I just want my family safe. Family? Tony repeated, drawing out the word. That sweet little girl of yours. Emma, right? She must be, 5 now? 6. Derek's face went white. I reached over and gripped his hand, steadying him. She's 5. Derek said, his voice tight. And after today, you'll never mention her name again. Tough words from a man who owes me money. But sure, I'll play along. Where and when? Central Bank parking garage, level 3, 11 o'clock. Public place. Smart. You trying to protect yourself, Derek? I'm trying to end this, today, permanently. Another pause. Fine, 11 o'clock. But Derek, if you're even $1 short, if there's any games, any tricks, I know where Emma goes to kindergarten. I know what time your wife picks her up. I know everything about your little family. You understand? Derek's jaw clenched. I understand. Good. See you at 11. The line went dead. Derek slumped in his chair, the phone slipping from his hand. Oh God, what have I done if this goes wrong? It won't, James said firmly. Detective Martinez is the best, and I'll be right there with you. What about Emma? Derek looked at his daughter, still coloring peacefully. If something happens to me, if Tony... Nothing is going to happen, I said. But Emma shouldn't be here. Do you have family? Someone you trust who could watch her for a few hours? Derek nodded slowly. My sister. She lives about 20 minutes away. Emma loves her. Call her. Have her pick Emma up in the next 15 minutes. Don't tell her what's happening. Just say you have an emergency appointment and need childcare. While Derek made the call, I pulled James aside. What about Scott? I asked quietly. He must be wondering where I am by now. James checked his phone. He sent 3 texts asking if you're all right. I told him you were running last-minute errands and would meet him at the church. Does he believe that? For now. But Mrs. Whitmore, we're running out of time. The ceremony starts at 2. Guests will start arriving by 1. You need to be there no later than 12:30. I know. Once we handle Tony, I'll go straight to the cathedral. And then what? You're going to object during the ceremony. I thought about the traditional wedding vows. The moment when the officiant asks if anyone objects. That dramatic pause that's usually just a formality. Today it wouldn't be. Yes, I said, but not just me. Derek needs to be there too, with Emma, with the marriage certificate, with proof. James's eyes widened. You're going to expose her in front of everyone. Scott won't believe words, James. You said it yourself this morning. He needs to see the truth with his own eyes. He needs to see Vanessa's husband and daughter. He needs to understand the full scope of what she was planning. It'll destroy him. Keeping this secret would destroy him more, I said. At least this way he'll know the truth before he legally binds himself to her. Before she has access to everything Robert built. Derek's sister arrived 15 minutes later, a kind-looking woman in her 40s who scooped Emma up with practiced ease. Say bye to Daddy, sweetie. He's got boring grown-up stuff to do. Bye, Daddy, Emma waved cheerfully. Will you and Mommy pick me up for dinner? Derek's voice cracked. Yeah, baby. We'll pick you up. After they left, Derek broke down. Full body shaking sobs. James and I gave him a moment, and I found myself thinking about Scott. About the phone calls earlier. The mysterious caller he'd told to stop calling. Derek, I said slowly, does Vanessa have any connection to Scott beyond what she's told him? Any prior contact? Derek looked up, wiping his eyes. What do you mean? This morning someone kept calling Scott. He told them to stop. Said he'd handle it after the wedding. Does that mean anything to you? Derek's expression changed. Oh God. Vanessa's been telling Scott that she has debts from a controlling ex-boyfriend. She made Scott think he was rescuing her from someone dangerous. My stomach dropped. Scott's been sending money, I said, the pieces falling into place. Hasn't he? Derek nodded miserably. About 3 months ago, Vanessa told him she needed help, that her ex was threatening her, demanding money. Scott started making payments. $50,000 so far, I think. $50,000? I felt sick. Where was that money going? To Tony. Vanessa was using Scott's hero complex to make partial payments to Tony while she set up the bigger con, the marriage. I thought about those phone calls in the car, Scott's scared voice, his insistence that everything would be fine once he married Vanessa. My son wasn't just a victim. He'd been an unknowing participant in his own deception. The caller this morning, I said, that was probably Tony or one of his people, calling Scott directly because the payments stopped. Vanessa must have told Scott to ignore any calls, Derek said. Told him the ex-boyfriend would try to contact him directly to manipulate him. So Scott thinks he's protecting Vanessa from a dangerous ex, I said slowly, when actually Vanessa is protecting herself from a loan shark while planning to take everything Scott has. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Vanessa hadn't just deceived Scott, she'd turned his best qualities against him. His kindness, his desire to help, his need to be someone's hero after failing to save his father. Robert had died of a sudden heart attack. Scott had been with him, had performed CPR, had called 911. But Robert was gone before the ambulance arrived. Scott had carried that guilt for 4 years, the feeling that he should have done more, should have saved him. Vanessa had found that wound and infected it. There's something else, Derek said quietly. Something Vanessa doesn't know I know. What, Mug? Last month I found documents in her car, research on the Whitmore estate. She wasn't just planning to take some money and leave. She was planning to take everything. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos he'd taken of the documents. Legal paperwork, estate planning guides, articles about marital rights to inherited wealth, and divorce settlements for short marriages. She was going to argue that as Scott's wife she deserved half of everything, I said, reading through the documents. Even inherited assets, even family businesses. The $500,000 for Tony was just the beginning, Derek confirmed. Once she had that, she was planning to drag out the divorce, to claim she'd given up her career for the marriage, to demand a massive settlement. I felt cold rage building. This wasn't just fraud. This wasn't just deception. This was calculated destruction. Does she know you found these? I asked. No. I photographed them and put them back exactly as they were. Send these to me. All of them. I'm going to make sure the authorities have every piece of evidence when this is over. Derek's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face went pale. It's Vanessa. She wants to know if I'm ready for tonight. She's asking if I've confirmed that Tony will be satisfied with the payment. What are you going to tell her? Derek's hands shook as he typed, Everything's set. He'll be satisfied. This ends today. The response came quickly. Good. After the wedding, we're free. I love you. Derek stared at that last sentence. Does she actually love me? Or am I just another mark? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe she loves you both in different ways. Maybe she's convinced herself this is the only option. Or maybe she's just a sociopath who's good at pretending. Which is worse? For you, I don't know. For my son, either way, it's devastating. At 10:15 a.m., we left for the Central Bank parking garage. James drove Derek in the sedan. I followed in my own car, staying several lengths back. Detective Martinez and her team were already in position. Unmarked cars, plainclothes officers' surveillance equipment. James had wired Derek with a recording device, a tiny microphone clipped inside his shirt collar, nearly invisible. The goal was simple. Get Tony to admit to threatening Emma, to acknowledge the extortion, to say anything that would hold up in court. I parked on level 2 and watched through my car window as Derek paced on level 3, a duffel bag at his feet. Richard had delivered the cash at 10:45, $500,000 in unmarked bills. He'd asked only one question, Is Scott in trouble? Not if I can help it, I'd replied, now that cash sat in a bag bait for a predator. At exactly 11 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the garage. Tinted windows, expensive rims, the kind of car that screamed criminal enterprise. 3 men got out. 2 were clearly muscle-large, intimidating, scanning the area for threats. The third was smaller, maybe 50 years old, dressed in an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the cruelty in his eyes. Tony Vincent. Even from a distance, I could see why people feared him. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Someone who believed he was untouchable. Derek stood his ground, though I could see his hands shaking. Tony approached slowly, his bodyguards flanking him. Derek Morgan, right on time. I appreciate punctuality. I have your money, Derek said, his voice surprisingly steady. All of it. Show me. Derek unzipped the duffel bag, revealing stacks of cash. Tony's eyes gleamed. 500,000, Derek said. We're clear. The debt is paid. You leave my family alone. Tony picked up one of the stacks, riffled through it. This is real money. I'm impressed, Derek. Where'd you get it? That's not your concern. Oh, but it is. See, I'm curious. A month ago, you couldn't scrape together 5,000. Now suddenly you've got 500,000. That's quite a turnaround. Derek said nothing. Tony stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing purr. Did your wife finally come through? Did Vanessa's little plan work? The money's here, Derek said, avoiding the question. Take it. We're done. Not quite. Tony zipped the bag closed, but didn't pick it up. See, Derek, I've been thinking. 500,000 is nice, but you know what's nicer? An ongoing revenue stream. Derek's face went white. We had a deal. I pay you back, you leave us alone. Deals change, and I've been doing some research of my own. Your wife is about to marry into serious money. The Whitmore family, they're worth tens of millions, maybe more. No, Derek said. Absolutely not. We paid you. This is over. Tony laughed. Oh, Derek, it's never over. Not until I say it is. You think I'm just going to walk away from a golden goose? Your wife is about to have access to more money than I've seen in years, and I'm going to make sure I get my share. You said 500,000 would clear the debt. I lied. Tony shrugged. What are you going to do about it? Go to the police. You're in too deep for that. Your wife committed fraud, identity theft, bigamy. You helped her. You're an accomplice. If you go to the cops, you both go to prison and little Emma goes into the system. Is that what you want? Derek was silent, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Tony leaned in close. Here's the new deal. Vanessa gets married. She gets access to the Whitmore money. And every month you pay me 10% of whatever she takes. Call it a finder's fee. And if we refuse, Tony's smile was pure evil. I know where Emma goes to kindergarten. Happy Starts Learning Center on Maple Avenue. Her teacher is Mrs. Patterson. She gets dropped off at 8:30 every morning. Your sister picks her up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Derek lunged forward, but Tony's bodyguards were faster. They grabbed Derek's arms, holding him back. Don't, Tony said calmly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You pay me or Emma disappears. And trust me, Derek, the people I know who buy pretty little girls, they pay very well. That was it. That was the confession we needed. Detective Martinez's voice crackled through the radio system, clear and authoritative. Atlanta PD, nobody move, hands in the air. Unmarked police cars screeched into position surrounding the area. Officers emerged from stairwells, from behind pillars, from vehicles. At least a dozen of them, all armed, all focused on Tony Vincent and his men. Tony's face went from confident to furious in seconds. What is this? What did you do, Derek? Derek ripped open his shirt, revealing the wire. I recorded every word, Tony. Every threat. Every admission. You're done. Tony Vincent was arrested at 11:17 a.m., so were his two bodyguards. Detective Martinez personally put the handcuffs on Tony, reading him his rights, while he screamed about entrapment and lawyers. Entrapment requires law enforcement to induce someone to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit, Martinez said calmly. You committed these crimes all on your own, Mr. Vincent. We just recorded you admitting to them. The charges were extensive extortion, criminal threats, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, attempted fraud. With the recording and Derek's testimony, the district attorney was confident Tony Vincent would be in prison for at least 20 years, maybe longer if they could connect him to other crimes. Derek collapsed against a concrete pillar once it was over, shaking with relief and delayed terror. James brought him water while I called Richard to thank him for the money. The cash is evidence now, I explained. It'll be tied up in the case against Tony Vincent, but once the trial is over... Keep it, Richard interrupted. Consider it a wedding gift, to Scott, for the wedding that's not going to happen. Richard, Nancy, you just took down a human trafficker and probably saved that little girl's life. That's worth $500,000 of Robert's money. He'd agree if he were here. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. Now go save your son. I hung up and turned to Derek. Emma is safe. Tony can't hurt her anymore. Derek looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. What happens now? Now you take Emma somewhere safe, somewhere Vanessa doesn't know about. Your sister's house, maybe, or a hotel. Somewhere you can keep her protected while all this plays out. And Vanessa faces justice. But Derek, I crouched down to his level. I need you to come to the wedding, at the cathedral, at 2:00, with Emma, with your marriage certificate, with proof of everything. Derek's eyes widened. You want me to show up at her wedding? I want you to tell the truth, in front of everyone. So there's no question, no doubt, no way for Vanessa to twist this into something it's not. That will destroy her. She was planning to destroy my son, I said quietly. And she used you and Emma as justification. But Emma is safe now. The threat is gone. Vanessa doesn't get to hide behind motherly protection anymore. She made choices. She needs to face consequences. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. For Emma. So she doesn't grow up thinking it's okay to hurt people, even for good reasons. She needs to know her mother's actions were wrong, even if the motivation was love. Exactly. Detective Martinez approached, finishing a call. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to need statements from both you and Mr. Morgan. This is a complex case. I'll give you everything you need, I said. After 2:00. Right now I have a wedding to stop. Martinez looked at me curiously. This is connected to a wedding. It's a long story, but yes, and if I don't get there in the next 90 minutes, my son is going to make the biggest mistake of his life. She glanced at her watch, then at Derek, then back to me. I can take preliminary statements now and get the detailed ones later, but I'll need both of you at the station by 5:00 latest. Deal. We gave abbreviated statements, just enough for Martinez to process the arrests and begin building her case. The full story would come later. By 12:15 p.m., I was back in my car, speeding toward the cathedral. My dress was wrinkled. My hair was a mess. I probably looked like I'd been through a war. In a way, I had. But I'd won. Tony Vincent was in custody. Emma was safe. Derek was free from the extortion. Now I just had to save my son. I pulled into the cathedral parking lot at 12:43 p.m. Cars were already filling up the spaces, early guests arriving, wedding party members getting ready. Through the tall windows, I could see flowers being arranged, candles being lit, the beautiful chaos of pre-wedding preparations. My phone had 17 missed calls, 12 from Scott, 3 from Kyle Richardson, Scott's best man, 2 from the wedding coordinator. I called Scott first. Mom, finally, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours. I'm here, sweetheart, in the parking lot. I'm sorry. I had some unexpected business to handle. Are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, just stressed. Big day and all. The lies tasted like ash. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. His voice softened. Mom, thank you. For everything. For supporting me and Vanessa. For accepting her into the family. It means everything to me. My heart shattered. Scott, I need you to know something. What? No matter what happens today, no matter what, I love you. Everything I do. Everything I've ever done is to protect you. Mom, you're really freaking me out. Is something wrong? Just promise me you'll remember that. Okay? Okay, but I need to go get ready. I'll see you soon. I hung up before he could ask more questions. James appeared at my car window looking concerned. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Scott has been worried sick. I know. Is everything in place? For the ceremony? Yes. Guests are arriving. Miss Sterling is in the bridal prep room. Mr. Scott is in the groom's room with Kyle. Father O'Brien is ready. Everything is proceeding on schedule. And Derek? I spoke with him 15 minutes ago. He's picking up Emma from his sister's house. They'll be here by 1:30. I've arranged for them to wait in the vestry, the small room behind the altar. They'll be out of sight until you give the signal. Good. I checked my reflection in the car mirror. I looked terrible. I need to clean up. There's a private bathroom near the chapel office. I'll show you. Inside, I did my best to repair the damage. Fixed my hair. Cleaned my face. Put on fresh lipstick. Changed into the navy dress I'd brought for the ceremony, elegant appropriate for a mother of the groom. In the mirror, I looked composed, put together, like a woman about to celebrate her son's wedding. No one could see the war I'd been fighting all morning. At 1:15 p.m., guests began arriving in earnest. I positioned myself near the entrance, greeting people as they came in. Business partners, family friends, people who'd known Scott since he was a child. Richard Caldwell arrived, giving me a knowing look. "Everything handled?" "Almost," I replied quietly. "Thank you again." "Robert would be proud of you, Nancy, whatever you're doing." At 1:35 p.m., I saw Derek's car pull up to the side entrance. He got out holding Emma's hand. The little girl wore a pretty pink dress, probably her Sunday best. She looked excited, pointing at the cathedral's architecture. James met them, guided them discreetly through the side door. No one noticed. Everyone was too focused on the main entrance, on the arriving guests, on the spectacle of the wedding. At 1:50 p.m., the wedding coordinator, a cheerful woman named Patricia, found me. "Mrs. Whitmore, there you are. We're about to start. Would you like to see Scott before the ceremony?" "Yes, please." She led me to the groom's preparation room. Scott stood before a mirror adjusting his tie. He looked so much like Robert on our wedding day. Same nervous energy, same hopeful expression. "Mom!" He turned, relief flooding his face. "You're here." "Of course I'm here." I crossed to him, fixed his slightly crooked tie. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. You were just gone all morning? And you sounded so strange on the phone." "Wedding day jitters," I lied. "For both of us." Scott pulled me into a hug. "Thank you for being here, for supporting this. I know Vanessa isn't exactly who you would have chosen for me, but Scott." I pulled back, looked into his eyes, Robert's eyes. "I need you to trust me, okay?" "Of course, but just trust me. No matter what happens in the next hour, trust that I love you and I'm doing what's best for you." His brow furrowed. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "You'll understand soon, I promise." Before he could respond, Kyle burst in. "Dude, 5 minutes. Are you ready for this?" Scott took a deep breath. Yeah, I'm ready." "No, sweetheart," I thought. "You're not, but you will be. Eventually." The organ music swelled. Guests rose to their feet. The traditional wedding processional began, bridesmaids in champagne silk, groomsmen in dark suits, flower girls scattering petals. I sat in the front row, exactly where I'd sat at my own wedding 35 years ago. Same pew, same church, same nervous anticipation. But this ending would be very different. Scott stood at the altar with Kyle beside him. Father O'Brien positioned between them, Bible in hand. My son's face showed everything nervous anticipation barely contained joy, eyes glistening with emotion as he kept glancing toward the back of the cathedral. I looked around the cathedral, every seat filled. Business partners, society friends, people who'd known our family for generations, all dressed in their finest, all expecting a beautiful wedding, all about to witness something very different. My phone buzzed silently. A text from James. "Derek and Emma in position. Detective Martinez is here as well. She wanted to see this." I glanced toward the side entrance. James gave me the smallest nod. "Ready." The bridal march began. The doors at the back of the cathedral opened wider. Vanessa appeared. She was stunning. I had to give her that. The wedding dress was exquisite Vera Wang, probably $50,000 at least. Cathedral train flowing behind her. Veil like morning mist. Bouquet of white peonies and garden roses. She looked like every bride should look. Radiant, nervous, hopeful. She looked like she loved him. Maybe she did in her own twisted way. Maybe she'd convinced herself that love and manipulation could coexist, that using someone and caring for them weren't mutually exclusive. It didn't matter now. Vanessa began her walk down the aisle, each step perfectly synchronized with the music. Guests whispered admiration. Beautiful. Stunning. They make such a lovely couple. Scott's face transformed when he saw her. Pure joy. Tears streaming down his cheeks. He pressed his hand to his chest like his heart might burst. He loved her. Completely. Devotedly. This was going to destroy him. But better destroyed now than destroyed later. Better heartbroken than bankrupt. Better alone than trapped in a fraudulent marriage. Vanessa reached the altar, took Scott's hands, smiled up at him with perfect tenderness. Father O'Brien's voice rang out warm and ceremonial. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Scott Whitmore and Vanessa Sterling in holy matrimony. The traditional words, sacred vows about to be spoken. Marriage is a sacred bond, Father O'Brien continued, built on trust, honesty, and love. The irony was like acid in my veins. It is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted. Scott looked at Vanessa like she'd hung the moon. Tyler stood proud beside him. The guests watched with rapt attention, expecting a fairy tale ending. I sat perfectly still in the front row, hands folded calmly in my lap. Patient. Waiting. Father O'Brien continued with opening prayers readings from Corinthians about love being patient and kind. Scott and Vanessa stood side by side looking absolutely perfect together. The entire community watching, expecting, celebrating. Vanessa's smile never wavered, but I saw her fingers tighten on Scott's hand just for a moment before releasing. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what. I sat motionless, my own hands clasped peacefully in my lap. Patient. Waiting. Father O'Brien's voice continued, but I barely heard the words anymore. I was counting down the minutes. To the moment that would change everything. Father O'Brien cleared his throat. His voice rang out across the silent cathedral, solemn and ceremonial. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The traditional silence followed. The moment every ceremony has but no one ever fills. 1 second. 2, 3. Vanessa's shoulders relaxed slightly, relief washing over her face. Scott smiled nervously at her, squeezing her hand tighter, his eyes glistening. 4, 5. I stood slowly from the front row. The sound of my movement fabric rustling the pew creaking echoed in the profound stillness. Every head turned toward me. I took a breath, steadied myself, channeled Robert's strength, and spoke 2 words that changed everything. I object. My voice was clear, steady, undeniable. The cathedral erupted. Gasps like collective breath punched out. Heads whipped around. Phones emerged. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Richard stood halfway concerned. Scott spun around his face, a mixture of confusion and horror. Mom, what are you... Vanessa's composure shattered instantly. Her voice trembled, desperate. Mrs. Whitmore, this isn't appropriate. This isn't the time. Father O'Brien stood frozen, completely unprepared for this moment, despite conducting hundreds of weddings. Nancy, this is most unusual. If you have concerns, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, I said, walking toward the altar. My heels clicked against marble, each step deliberate and measured. This needs to be said here, now, in front of everyone. The whispers grew louder around me. Guests turning to each other, standing to see better. Phones being discreetly pulled out to record this moment. This wedding cannot proceed, I said, my voice carrying through the entire cathedral, reaching every corner. I'm sorry to everyone gathered here, but it cannot. Scott stepped toward me, his face a mixture of betrayal and desperate confusion. Mom, what are you saying? Have you lost your mind? This is my wedding day. I stopped at the altar steps just below where he and Vanessa stood. My eyes met my son's, those eyes so much like his father's, and my heart broke. But I didn't waver. No, sweetheart. I finally found it. I turned my gaze to Vanessa. She stood frozen, bouquet trembling in her hands, the perfect bride facade cracking before everyone's eyes. This is insane, Vanessa said, her voice rising with panic. You're ruining this as my wedding. Our wedding. Scott, your mother is... I cut her off, my voice still calm, still controlled. Because the woman standing at this altar is already married. The cathedral exploded. Louder gasps, stunned exclamations, chairs scraping as people stood. What, she's married to who? Is this real? The whispers became a roar. Scott staggered backward like I'd physically struck him. What are you talking about, Mom? That's impossible. We've been together 2 years. She's never... Kyle caught Scott's arm, steadying him, his own face pale with shock. Vanessa's voice turned shrill, desperate. That's not true. She's lying. She's completely lying. Scott, don't listen to her. Your mother is trying to sabotage us because she never wanted you to move on after your father died. I kept my gaze locked on Vanessa, unwavering. Tell everyone here about Derek. Tell them about Emma." Silence fell like a hammer. Every eye fixed on Vanessa. Her face went from white to gray. Her hands started shaking so badly the bouquet trembled visibly. Scott looked between us, his voice breaking. "Who's Derek? Who's Emma, Mom? What are you talking about?" Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The mask had finally completely shattered. From somewhere in the crowd, Richard's voice. "Nancy, what's going on?" I didn't take my eyes off Vanessa. Derek Morgan is her husband. Legal husband. They've been married for 6 years. Emma is their 5-year-old daughter. The cathedral exploded again, louder this time. Voices overlapping, people standing. Even the organist stood up to see what was happening. Then slowly heads began turning toward the back of the cathedral. Movement caught everyone's attention. The side door opened, and there he was, walking down the center aisle with measured steps, a little girl clutching his hand. Derek Morgan had entered the building. Derek Morgan walked down the center aisle of the cathedral, Emma's small hand clasped firmly in his. Every footstep echoed against marble. The cathedral held its collective breath, hundreds of eyes following their progress. Whispers rippled through the guests like wind through leaves. "Who is that man?" "There's a child." "What's happening?" "Did she say Daddy?" Emma looked around, her 5-year-old eyes wide with wonder at the soaring ceilings, the stained glass windows casting rainbow light across polished floors, the masses of white flowers. "Daddy, it's so pretty here," she said, her voice carrying in the stunned silence. "Look at all the flowers. It's like a princess castle." Then she saw Vanessa standing at the altar in her white wedding dress, veil flowing behind her, and Emma's face lit up with pure, innocent delight. "Mommy," she exclaimed, pointing, "you look like a real princess." The cathedral erupted. Louder gasps, shocked exclamations, chairs scraping as more people stood. "Mommy?" She called her Mommy. "Oh my God!" Vanessa's voice cracked with panic. "Emma, no! Derek, what are you doing? You can't—" But Derek kept walking steady and purposeful until he reached the front of the cathedral. He stopped just a few steps from the altar where Scott and Vanessa stood. He looked at my son with genuine sympathy in his exhausted eyes, then at Vanessa with resignation, then at the shocked congregation. "My name is Derek Morgan," he said, his voice trembling but holding firm, carrying through the silent cathedral. He looked directly at Vanessa. "And Vanessa Morgan is my wife." The whispers became a roar. People stood to see better. Someone gasped, "No." Someone else said, "This can't be real." Derek continued each word deliberate and clear. "We've been legally married for 6 years. We have a home together on Maple Street. We share a bank account." He gestured toward Emma with infinite tenderness. "And this is our daughter, Emma. She's 5 years old." Emma, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, waved cheerfully at the crowd. "Hi, everyone, I'm Emma." Scott staggered backward like he'd been physically struck. No, this can't be. You're lying. You have to be lying." He turned to me, his face a mask of desperation. "Mom, tell me he's lying." I caught Scott's arm, holding him steady as his whole world crumbled around him. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. But it's the truth. I saw them together this morning. I spoke with Derek. I have proof." Scott's face went from shock to devastation. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands started shaking. He turned to Vanessa, voice breaking completely. "Vanessa, tell me he's lying. Please, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you love me. Tell me any of this was real." Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. Only tears streaming down her carefully made-up face, mascara beginning to run in dark rivers. Derek's expression filled with sadness and guilt. "I'm sorry, Scott. I truly am. You seem like a good man. You don't deserve this." He paused, choosing his words carefully, aware that everyone in the cathedral was hanging on every syllable. "But she's been planning this for months. She researched your family's wealth, your hotels, your real estate, your investments. She targeted you deliberately at that charity gala. It wasn't coincidence. We owe money to dangerous people. She thought marrying into your family would solve everything, that she could access your accounts, pay off our debts, and we could disappear." Kyle stepped forward, his usual humor completely gone, his voice tight with anger and confusion. "Scott, man, I don't even—" Scott held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Vanessa. "Say something," he whispered. Anything. Tell me this isn't real. Tell me you actually love me." The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. Father O'Brien finally found his voice shaken. I cannot continue this ceremony. I've never... Richard rose from his seat, his voice carrying concern and barely controlled fury. "Nancy, is all of this verified? Is this actually true?" I kept my hand firm on Scott's arm, anchoring him to reality as his world shattered. "Every single word, Richard. Every single word." Scott's knees buckled. I caught him, Kyle, rushing to support his other side. My son stared at the woman he'd planned to build a life with, waiting desperately, heartbreakingly hoping for a denial that would never come. "Natasha," Scott whispered one final time, his voice barely audible. "Please." Vanessa opened her mouth, but this time no lies emerged. Only silence. And in that silence lay her complete, devastating confession. Then she collapsed, sinking to her knees at the altar, the beautiful white wedding dress pooling around her like a broken dream. The bouquet fell from her hands, white peonies and garden roses scattering across the marble steps. Sobs racked her body, not from remorse or regret, but from the realization that her carefully constructed plan had shattered completely. And with it, my son's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. I stepped closer to where Vanessa knelt, my voice firm but measured. Not cruel, just unwavering. "You owe him an explanation. You owe all of us." "Why?" Vanessa's sobs intensified, her voice breaking between gasps. I didn't have any other choice. You have to understand." "There's always a choice, Vanessa," I said, my voice staying cold, cutting through her excuses. "Always." Scott's voice came out raw, barely above a whisper, each word painful. "Why me out of everyone in this city? Why did you choose me? Why did you do this to me?" Vanessa looked up at Scott, mascara streaking down her face in dark rivers, her carefully applied makeup destroyed. "We had debts," she said through her tears. "Dangerous debts to dangerous people." Derek spoke quietly from the side, Emma now lifted into his arms, her small face pressed against his shoulder to shield her from the adult drama unfolding. "A man named Tony Vincent. He loaned us money when we had nowhere else to turn. Medical bills from Emma's birth, she was 3 months premature. Then bad investments trying to dig ourselves out. But Tony, he's not a banker. He's something much worse. Threatened how?" I pressed, needing everything out in the open, needing the full truth told. Derek's arms tightened around Emma protectively, his voice dropping to barely audible. "He said if we didn't pay him back with interest by the end of this year, he'd take Emma, sell her to people who traffic children. We'd never see her again." Shocked gasps rippled through the assembled guests. Horrified whispers followed. "Oh my God, that's terrible. Those poor people. How desperate they must have been." Vanessa's voice rose, desperate and pleading. "I was trying to protect her. Don't you see I was trying to save my daughter? What kind of mother would I be if I didn't do everything possible to keep her safe? By destroying my family to save yours," I said, holding firm, unmoved. Vanessa's sobs grew louder, her words tumbling out frantically. "I researched your family for months. The hotels, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios. I thought if I married into your family, we'd have access to real money, real protection. Tony couldn't touch us if we had the Whitmore name behind us. We could pay him off completely and disappear, start over somewhere safe where he'd never find us." Scott stepped closer, his entire body trembling with emotion. "So you used me. You hunted me down at that fundraiser. You researched my dead father. You learned what I cared about so you could pretend to care about the same things. You manipulated me. You made me fall in love with a character you created. A lie." "I'm sorry." Vanessa looked up at him, and for the first time I saw what might have been genuine anguish on her face. "Scott, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this. You're a good man. You deserve so much better than—" My voice cut through her apology like a blade. "Sorry doesn't erase 6 years of systematic lies. Sorry doesn't undo bigamy and fraud." Scott stopped directly in front of Vanessa, looking down at her kneeling form, his voice barely holding together. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "Even a little bit, even for a moment? Or was every kiss, every word, every promise, every time you said I love you, all of it just an act?" The cathedral fell completely silent. Every person held their breath, waiting. Vanessa looked up at Scott, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no answer came. Seconds ticked by. 5, 10, 15. Scott's voice cracked completely. "Answer me, please. I need to know if any of it was real." Vanessa looked down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. Tears fell onto the white marble floor. That silence was the most brutal answer of all. Scott turned away sharply, his hand covering his face, shoulders shaking. Kyle immediately stepped forward, placing both hands on Scott's shoulders in silent support. I addressed Vanessa one final time, my voice carrying through the cathedral so everyone could hear. "Your desperation doesn't justify what you did. You didn't just deceive one person. You deceived an entire community. You committed fraud. You planned to steal from our family. And you destroyed my son's ability to trust in the process." Richard's voice came from somewhere in the crowd. "Nancy, should we notify the authorities?" "Already done," I replied calmly. Scott's shoulders continued to shake. I moved toward him, wanting to hold my son to somehow absorb his pain. But before I could reach him, a calm, authoritative voice echoed from the cathedral entrance. "Mrs. Whitmore, we're here as requested." I turned. Detective Sarah Martinez walked down the center aisle, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers. All 3 calm and professional, badges visible. James had made one more call I hadn't known about. The male officer spoke first, his voice measured and official. "We're looking for Vanessa Morgan, also known as Vanessa Sterling." Vanessa's panic was immediate and visceral. "No, please." The female officer approached gently but firmly. "Ma'am, I need you to stand up." Vanessa struggled to her feet, legs trembling beneath her ruined wedding dress. Detective Martinez's tone remained professional. "Vanessa Morgan, you're under arrest for marriage fraud, bigamy, attempted identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The female officer guided Vanessa's hands behind her back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the silent cathedral. Emma's frightened voice cut through everything. "Mommy, where are they taking Mommy?" Derek lifted Emma higher, turning her face away from the scene. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy has to go talk to some important people for a while." Scott watched in silence, frozen. Kyle stayed close beside him, a steady presence. Detective Martinez approached me. "Mrs. Whitmore, you contacted us through James Porter." I gestured toward James near the entrance. He nodded in confirmation. "We'll need statements from you, Mr. Morgan, and anyone else with relevant information," Martinez said. Derek, holding Emma protectively, nodded. "Of course. I have everything. Marriage certificate photos, bank records, text messages showing her planning this. All of it." The female officer continued reading Vanessa her rights. "Do you understand these rights as I've explained them to you?" Vanessa nodded through tears, her voice breaking. "Yes," I addressed Martinez quietly. "There's also a man named Tony Vincent. He's been threatening Mr. Morgan's family. Extortion and worse." Martinez's expression shifted to satisfaction. "Already handled, Mrs. Whitmore. We have Mr. Vincent in custody as of this morning. He attempted to extort Mr. Morgan one final time, and we recorded everything. He's being held on charges of extortion, criminal threats, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking." Derek's relief was profound and visible. "Emma's safe." "Yes, sir," Martinez confirmed. "You and your daughter are completely safe. Mr. Vincent won't be threatening anyone for a very long time." Vanessa was led down the aisle, white wedding dress trailing behind her handcuffs, reflecting the stained glass light in cruel irony. She looked back at Scott one final time, desperate. "Scott, please, Scott turned his head, looked directly at her. His voice came out flat, dead, empty. "Don't." That single word carried more finality than anything else said that day. The officers guided Vanessa through the cathedral doors. They closed with a heavy thud that seemed to echo forever. Silence fell over hundreds of guests. Not a whisper, not a movement. Scott stood at the altar in his wedding suit, staring at nothing. Richard rose slowly. "Nancy, what happens now?" I looked at my son, frozen where he was supposed to have been married, and felt my heart break for him all over again. "Now," I said quietly, "we help him heal." The cathedral began to empty slowly, quietly. Some guests left whispering to each other. Some left in stunned silence. A few stopped briefly to touch Scott's shoulder, murmuring, "I'm so sorry," before moving on. Richard paused beside me. Nancy, if you need anything at all. I nodded gratefully. Thank you, Richard, for everything, especially this morning. He squeezed my hand and left. Kyle approached carefully. Mrs. Whitmore, should I— Give us a moment, I said gently. Please. He glanced at Scott, nodded, and stepped away to give us privacy. Scott sat down heavily in the front pew, the same pew where I'd sat at my own wedding 35 years ago, still in his wedding suit, head in his hands. I sat beside him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, filled only with the distant sound of cars leaving the parking lot and the soft rustle of Father O'Brien directing the cleanup crew. Finally, Scott's voice came out rough and broken. How long have you known? I answered honestly. Since this morning. James discovered it weeks ago, but we confirmed everything today. Scott looked up, his eyes red and swollen. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why wait until I was standing at the altar? I held his gaze, needing him to understand. Because you wouldn't have believed me, Scott. If I'd told you yesterday, you would have thought I was being paranoid, overprotective. You would have defended her. You might have married her anyway just to prove me wrong. Scott laughed bitterly. You're right. I would have. I would have chosen her over you. He paused. God, I'm such a fool. No, I spoke firmly. You're not a fool. You wanted to believe in love. That's not weakness. That's courage. It feels like weakness, Scott said, his voice filling with tears. I feel like the biggest idiot in the world. She deceived all of us, Scott. She was very good at it. She planned for months. That's what made her dangerous. Scott stared at his hands. Was any of it real? Did she feel anything, or was I just a mark? I chose my words carefully. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe there were moments when her feelings were genuine. Maybe she doesn't even know anymore. People are complicated. Even people who do terrible things. Scott's voice cracked. Dad would have seen through her, wouldn't he? My chest tightened. Maybe, maybe not. Your father was brilliant, but love makes everyone vulnerable. Even him. Scott's tears fell freely now. I miss him so much, and I thought Vanessa filled that hole, but she just made it bigger. I wrapped my arms around my son, and he leaned against my shoulder, finally letting himself be vulnerable, letting himself break. Your father taught me something, I said quietly. He said protect the ones you love even when it hurts them, because losing them hurts more. Scott whispered, You saved me. I did what any mother would do. No. Scott pulled back to look at me, his face streaked with tears. Most people would have stayed silent. You risked everything, your relationship with me, your reputation. You were willing to have me hate you to save me. I never risked everything, I corrected gently. I risked your anger, but I could never risk your future. Silence fell again. Scott processing everything, working through the devastation. What do I do now? He asked finally. Now you heal. You take time. You let people who love you help you. Scott nodded slowly. Thank you, Mom, for being brave enough to do what I couldn't. I kissed his forehead. Always, sweetheart. Always. 6 months later, August, I sat in my office at Whitmore Hotel's afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. On my desk sat a photograph, Robert, me, and Scott as a little boy, all three of us laughing at something long forgotten. The door opened. Scott walked in carrying project folders, and I studied him carefully. He looked better. Not healed completely, that would take time, maybe years, but lighter. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. He slept through the nights now. Sometimes he even smiled. Mom, I finished the Richardson merger proposal. Want to review it? How are you doing, Scott, really? He sat down answering honestly. Some days are harder than others, but I'm okay. Therapy helps a lot. Dr. Patterson says I need to rebuild trust slowly, no rushing into anything. Pride swelled in my chest. That's very wise. I'm taking time, he continued, focusing on work, on family, on myself. He paused. Dad would be proud of how I'm handling this, right? Your father would be incredibly proud. Scott smiled slightly. I hope so. He gestured to the folders. Business is doing well. The Miller project got approved last week. The new hotel in Charleston opens next month. And personally, I'm better. I started volunteering at that children's hospital, the one Dad used to support. It helps you know doing something good, something real. That sounds perfect. Scott's expression shifted. I heard from the prosecutor last week. Vanessa's sentence came down. 4 years for fraud, bigamy, and attempted identity theft. She'll serve at least 2 with good behavior. I nodded. Justice was served. I don't hate her, Mom, Scott said quietly. I feel sorry for her. She destroyed everything and got nothing. What about Derek and Emma? Derek sent me a message last month. He and Emma are doing really well. They moved to Oregon. Fresh start. You helped with their legal fees and relocation costs, didn't you? It was the right thing to do. They were innocent in all this. Scott smiled genuinely. Derek said Emma still asks about the nice lady at the church. She means you. She's a sweet child. None of this was her fault. Scott stood. I'm heading out. Dinner this weekend, just us. Always. He hugged me, genuine warm healing. Thank you, Mom, for everything. After he left, I sat alone looking at Robert's photograph again. We did it, Bernard, I whispered to the image. Our son is safe. They say a mother's instinct is the greatest gift. I wish I'd trusted mine sooner. But in the end, I did what Robert always taught me. I protected my family. Scott is healing slowly, carefully, but genuinely. He's learned to recognize warning signs, to trust his instincts, to ask questions before giving his heart away. He's stronger now. More cautious, yes, but also more aware. The business is thriving. James is officially part of our family now, not just an employee, but a trusted friend. Uncle James, Scott calls him. James tears up every time. Derek and Emma are safe in Oregon. Tony Vincent is in prison for 15 years. The threats are gone. Derek sends updates occasionally. Emma is thriving in her new school, making friends, being a normal 5-year-old. He's rebuilding his life one day at a time. And Vanessa, she's serving her time. I don't wish her ill. I hope she uses these years to understand the harm she caused to find a better path. But I don't regret what I did. Justice isn't revenge. It's protecting others from harm. Vanessa thought she could build a future on lies. She believed if she could just reach that altar, just say I do, everything would work out. But truth doesn't need permission to surface. It only needs someone brave enough to open the door. My phone buzzed. A text from Scott. Dinner Saturday, I'm cooking. Well, attempting to cook. Be prepared for takeout backup plan. I smiled and typed back. Sounds perfect. I'll bring dessert. Another text. Love you, Mom. Thanks for not giving up on me. Never, sweetheart, I whispered to the screen. Never. I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline, the city Robert and I had built our business in, the city where we'd raised our son, the city that held so many memories. Some memories were beautiful. Some were painful. All of them were ours. And now new memories were being made. Better ones. Honest ones. I picked up the photograph of Robert, me, and young Scott. Traced Robert's face with my finger. He's going to be okay, I told him. Our boy is going to be just fine. And for the first time in 6 months, I truly believed it.